And so we're going to talk about her lesson that you were able to view on the Just Ask website, and we're going to talk about how that went. We're going to talk about her standards. So I'm going to start with asking Sarah about what she calls her day 3, and what were some of the things that were going on, maybe examples that you were using to make the content clear for your kindergartners, so that it supports in their understanding. So just explain to us your day 3 and what you were doing.
Okay, well, on day 3, we were taking our leaf painting and that we had done the previous day, where they painted a leaf of their choice and had to think about the colors, the shape, the size of the leaf. And I always try to model ahead of time to give the children a better visual of what they're expected to do. We have a lot of second language learners in our classroom. I have 50% of my class that goes out for ESL instruction. So we really try to do a lot of the modeling and the visual to help them along. So first I modeled for the students, and I had them help me think about different descriptive words that would tell about my leaf. I also referred back to the web we had made on day 1, where they described their own leaves and shared with the partner. So I think modeling is a really important part for these children. It's also very early in the school year, so as we get ready to do a writing activity, a lot of the children aren't used to actually writing words. So I wanted to model different ways they would be able to incorporate the writing when they went to that part of the lesson. So I modeled stretching out words and thinking about the beginning sounds they hear, middle and ending sounds, but also gave them the opportunity that they could go back to the web and copy words. I have a couple children that are still working on even learning letters. So for them to be able to sound out words is just asking and expecting too much for them. So for them to be able to independently go and copy the words that they are looking for was a good chance for them to still be able to write. The one thing I wish I would have done differently was most of the children are not ready for sentences, but I do have 1 or 2 kids that could have easily written a couple sentences about their leaves. So I think something I would change is maybe after they had written those words to have them add 1 or 2 sentences about using those descriptive words to describe their leaves.
So you're talking about the vocabulary words, and it makes me think of something either I read in your lesson or maybe saw on the video, but you talked about they were using the vocabulary words later when they were talking about the description of the leaves. So did that surprise you, or would that be typical?
Some of it kind of surprised me, depending on the kids. I mean, some kids it's very typical for them to reuse the words. And some of the words we had read like in the leaf book in the previous day, but we've also done some in math. So like the curves and points we had talked about when we were doing math lessons. So it's kind of neat to see that crossover between math and then connecting that to the leaves when we were doing the comparison. As far as academic language, which I didn't really hear them use as much, but we talked a lot about comparing and describing, which are other things we've done a lot in math as we compare numbers and describe shapes. So to see them use that in the leaf lesson was kind of neat, so they could compare their 2 leaves and think about the different descriptive words that tell about them.
One of the other things that was in there was the students had an opportunity, or you were doing some instruction, hopefully to extend their learning and have more conversation. And I think I either read or in just our dialogue back and forth at other times, you made a comment about them being able to do more of that collaboration. Can you elaborate on what you were thinking with that?
Well, one thing we've really worked on at our school is giving the children time to interact with one another and to share their ideas. So I usually try to have them have a time where they each have a buddy and they know who their buddy is. And they, at that time, can describe their leaf, tell about what their thoughts were. And it just gives them a chance to practice vocabulary, especially for maybe the second language learners, to hear other kids use it and be able to see the visual as the kids are describing it. So as they collaborate, I think that starts to give them more ideas, maybe that they hadn't thought of. And sometimes some of the kids that maybe always have the idea, maybe they even get an idea that's different from what they were thinking of. So it's good for them to see that everyone has ideas that they can share, and everyone has, they're worthy of giving their thoughts to.
I'm going to go back to something else that you said again. So when we talk about the standards, you know, I know that within your lesson, we had the science standards and then you had literacy standards, but also you just made comment a couple minutes ago about there was math that could be brought into that also. So do you want to go ahead and talk about your literacy standards?
Yeah, so with the writing, and I'm very fortunate during this taping. At this time, I had a Title I teacher and an ESL teacher that come in during that time, which is really good because at this time of the year when kids aren't really able to write a whole lot independently, it helped us break them down into smaller groups. So what we were looking for as far as literacy standards when they went to the writing was that they knew to start like at the top of the page and move from the left to the right. So just kind of basic concepts about print. Some ones that are a little more challenging for them was the listening for letters and letter sounds. So making that connection between the letter and the sound that it makes, and also using that phonetically to try to sound out simple words. And a lot of times we don't expect them to write the word correctly unless they were copying it from the web that we had made the previous day. So for leaf, they might have L-E-F. And that's fine for right now. We call that temporary spelling, and it gives them an opportunity to try to write independently without always having to have teacher support.
So with the big push with the reading and the math, how do you fit in? How do you bundle working with your science content and still being able to meet all the literacy standards and the math standards? How does that work for you as a kindergarten teacher?
Math is oftentimes quite a bit more separate. Sometimes we can tie it in, but science and social studies is really easy to tie in during our literacy time. We do a lot of it with when we're doing comprehension. We'll tie in either a fiction or nonfiction story to bring in whatever our science theme is for that week. Also, when we're doing writing and small group activities, a lot of time we're able to tie in across the curriculum some of those different activities. But I said primarily the comprehension and the writing, we're able to tie in the different curriculums.
So when you reflect back and you think about your teaching, the instruction, and the learning from the students, what would your next steps be? Maybe things that you would try differently, something to extend on. Just what would your next steps be?
Well, right now, one thing we're really working on that will continue throughout the year is just helping them to become better at sharing their ideas and listening to their partner's ideas. Because a lot of times they're wanting to share their idea, but they're not necessarily thinking about what their partner is saying and thinking if they understand that. So that's something we're really focusing on right now. Because like I said, we do a lot of the pair share before we go to either sharing out as a whole class or going to do work in our journals or going to finish a project. We do a lot of that pair share. As far as the actual lesson, in the spring, we do a unit on plants, and I'd like to bring this back again and go to the whole plant and have them think about making a model of the whole plant beyond the leaf. So how we can kind of just tie that in, and then in the spring, they'll be writing a whole lot more than they are right now. So I think they'll be able to do a lot more with it, but it would be neat to see them actually try to make a model of a plant and think about the different parts and the needs and how they take in the water and how they need the rainwater and the sunlight to grow, and just a lot of fun experiments we can do with that later.
That will be interesting to look at to see, you know, if they bring that knowledge that they learned from doing these leaves and the words and the descriptive words to see if that carries over, when do you do the other part you said in the spring. And it would be neat to see that comparison between their words or sentences that they wrote at the beginning of the year to what they ended up with that plant unit that you said that you would be working on too.
Yeah, I agree. There's a huge change from the beginning of kindergarten to the end of what they can do independently. So it's exciting to see that.
Well, thank you. I want to take the time to thank you for collaborating with me and just doing a reflective conversation. And thank you for those of the other people that might be viewing or reading any of my lessons or Sarah's lessons on the Just Ask website.
Thank you very much.